Alright, in case you've been living under a rock the past couple of weeks, let me fill you in. Over the past few months, there have been an enormous amount of UFO and UAP sightings across the world. What you're looking at right now are just a few that I've gathered over the past few days. When people think of UFOs, they think of flying saucers, right? Disc-shaped objects displaying incredible speed and maneuverability. But in the newly released Immaculate Constellation documents, you'll learn that there are far more than you can even imagine. Many are shape-shifting biological UAPs with moving limbs that clearly resemble the infamous jellyfish UAP from last year. And believe it or not, there have been thousands of sightings of these particular UAP in the past couple of months. But that's not all there is. Some even resemble the surface of the sun, emitting enormous amounts of energy. Others can hide within clouds and even take their shape. And now, we even have cases of UAP drones flying over military bases, nuclear facilities, and even parts of Europe.
The Pentagon confirms that unidentified drones did fly over Langley Air Force Base in Hampton.
3 Air Force bases in England where U.S. troops are stationed detected drones last week. The incident raising concerns from the UK and U.S. Air Force.
These drones have infested any area with vested nuclear technology, and the Pentagon doesn't seem to care too much.
None of these incursions impact the base residents, the facilities, or the assets that we have on those bases.
And don't worry, we're going to talk a lot more about this towards the end of the video. But before we get to that, it has to be emphasized that even in a time of transparency and disclosure, the powers that be are fighting tooth and nail to keep you misinformed, to keep you distracted on something else, on anything else. But why? If you scour the internet even just a little nowadays, you'll find an endless amount of UFO footage and recent evidence. I just showed you plenty. People are constantly talking about aliens and UFOs, and they're desperate for more information. Can you blame them? This is a hot topic, and people seem more open to the idea now more than ever. And yet, unknown forces are determined to make sure you keep your head buried in the sand. Hell, they're doing it themselves. So why all the secrecy? What could be so important and earth-shattering that it has them terrified to tell you the truth? Well, to better understand this, we need to go back in time. When all this secrecy began, we have a lot of ground to cover, so buckle up. It's gonna be a bumpy ride. Welcome to Roswell, New Mexico. This stretch of the state is incredibly dark, and on this night in particular, there was a light show going on. You see, a large lightning storm was moving across areas of the state, but lightning wasn't the only thing onlookers were observing that night. Reports emerged of flashing lights zipping across the sky. Their movements were erratic and unlike anything anyone had ever seen. At the nearby military base, officials were investigating mysterious radar blips throughout the night. They were far too fast to be considered aircraft. They'd inexplicably vanish and reappear after several seconds. Members working at the Alamogordo bombing range were also tracking these anomalies. Now, this was a big deal, because at this range were the 509th Bomber Group, an elite military unit responsible for deploying atomic weapons. See where this is going? Witnesses continued to report sightings of these incredible craft to George Wilcox, the local sheriff, over the next few days, but he assured them that it was likely just lightning, and obviously, this is the most reasonable explanation, until a rancher by the name of Mac Basil arrived at the station with evidence of a wreckage. In the back of Mac's pickup truck lies some unusual material. It looks like tin foil, but it's much lighter and far more durable. Strangely enough, when you crumple it in your hand, it reverts back to its original shape once you release it. The sheriff then contacted the military, who sent Major Jesse Marshall, an intelligence officer from the Roswell Army Airfield, to investigate the wreckage. He traveled with Basil to the crash site where he retrieved more debris and brought it back to the base. The very next day, the Army had completely overtaken the area. Any bystanders were quickly removed from the scene, and an extensive crash retrieval program was immediately put in place. And soon after, the military issues a press release with a shocking revelation.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection. Late this afternoon, a bulletin from New Mexico suggested that the widely publicized mystery of the flying saucers may soon be solved. Army Air Force officers reported that one of the strange discs had been found and inspected sometime last week. Our correspondents in Los Angeles and Chicago have been in contact with Army officials endeavoring to obtain all possible late information. Joe Wilson reports to us now from Chicago. The Army may be getting to the bottom of all this talk about the so-called flying saucers. As a matter of fact, the 509th Atomic Bomb Group headquarters at Roswell, New Mexico, reports that it has received one of the discs, which landed on a ranch outside Roswell. The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer. Colonel William Blanchard of the Roswell Air Base refuses to give details of what the flying disc looks like. In Fort Worth, Texas, where the object was first sent, Brigadier General Roger Ramey says that it is being shipped by air to the AAF Research Center at Wright Field, Ohio.
What's crazy about this is that the very next day, the military retracts its statement. They claim the debris was simply from a weather balloon. Sound familiar? Despite this false alarm, the government quickly establishes Project Blue Book, an initiative to investigate other UFO sightings. Over the next few years, the government would also establish Area 51, a base rumored to develop and reverse engineer alien and advanced technology. They kept this base a secret up until the 1990s, and, well, the rest is history. Now, I don't mean to bore you with a history lesson, but everything that's happening today can be traced back to that very night. It's when all the secrecy and cover-ups began. But what had the government so spooked that caused them to pull a full 180 on their historic discovery? Well, witness testimonies indicate that UFO fragments weren't the only thing retrieved that night, because underneath the tarp of that wreckage lied something beyond explanation: alien bodies from another world. Picture this. Your country just won the Second World War. You're crowned as the greatest global superpower in the Western world. But all of a sudden you realize you're no longer top dog. There's something out there with faster craft, better materials, and more advanced technology than yours. Well, this simply couldn't stand. Since then, the US government has done everything in its power to discredit any and all UFO sightings and evidence.
And now I'll ask Officer Stein and his colleagues to escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party. Don't get him too close to me, please. This just goes to show that you guys are entirely too serious.
And if you fast forward all the way to now, people are sick of the show, even those in positions of power.
We're met with people not wanting us to have hearings. We're met with people not wanting us to ask you questions. In fact, many of us were told not to ask some of you certain questions on certain topics.
After all this time, members of Congress have begun holding congressional hearings with former military specialists to disclose the UFO anomalies to the general public. This all began last year when David Grusch, a former intelligence officer with the US Air Force, made headlines when he came before Congress under oath and revealed not only the existence of alien craft in the possession of the US government, but even alien remains as well.
I have taken every step I can to corroborate this evidence over a period of 4 years while I was with the UAP Task Force and do my due diligence on the individual sharing it. This is because of these steps, I believe strongly in the importance of bringing this information before you.
This event took the world by storm and, of course, heightened the public's curiosity into UFOs and UAPs. However, there were some drawbacks from this. Grusch's credibility was immediately brought into question in a fierce smear campaign. The media immediately began scrutinizing his claims and questioned their validity. All of a sudden, Grusch's career and relationships within the intelligence community began to deteriorate, and any substance that came with the hearing was inevitably swept under the rug. And even after all this publicity, the Pentagon doubled down in March of 2024 by stating that they still had no evidence of alien spacecraft. Shocker, I know. But luckily, the fight doesn't end here. On November 13th, 2024, Congress held another joint hearing on UFOs and UAPs, and the disclosure community brought more firepower with them this go-around. Those testifying included Tim Galladay, a retired Rear Admiral of the US Navy, Michael Gold, a former NASA Associate Administrator of Space Policy, Michael Schellenberger, founder of the public news outlet and provider of the Immaculate Constellation documents detailing all of the UAP, and, of course, Luis Elizondo, former Department of Defense official. You've probably seen this guy's face the most. Now, during the hearing, Gold and Schellenberger were there mainly to encourage the conversation around UAPs to continue with their expertise, stating that the claims and evidence are legitimate and should be looked into. Galladay and Elizondo, however, provided a little more meat to chew on.
During this exercise, I received an email on Navy's secure network from the operations officer of U.S. Fleet Forces Command. The email was addressed to all the subordinate commanders, and the subject line read in all capital letters, "Urgent Safety of Flight Issue." The text of the email was brief but alarming, with words to the effect, "If any of you know what these are, tell me ASAP. We are having multiple near mid-air collisions, and if we do not resolve this soon, we are going to have to shut down the exercise." Attached to the email is what is now known as the Go Fast video, captured on the forward-looking infrared sensor of one of the Navy F-A-18 aircraft participating in the exercise. The very next day, that email disappeared from my account and those of the other recipients, without explanation.
Let me be clear. UAP are real. Advanced technologies not made by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe. Furthermore, the U.S. is in possession of UAP technologies, as are some of our adversaries. I believe we are in the midst of a multi-decade secretive arms race, one funded by misallocated taxpayer dollars and hidden from our elected representatives and oversight bodies. I believe that America's greatness depends on three elements: A, a watchful Congress; B, a responsive executive branch; and C, an informed public. Over the last decade and a half, I learned that certain UAP programs were and are operating without any of these elements. Although much of my government work on the UAP subject still remains classified, excessive secrecy has led to grave misdeeds against loyal civil servants, military personnel, and the public, all to hide the fact that we are not alone in the cosmos.
Obviously, their statements are incredibly compelling. And keep in mind, these gentlemen are under oath, so I don't believe they're lying by any means. However, there are some things about their testimonies that require a closer look. Tim Galladay discussed the day he received the infamous Go Fast video in an email, a video that's been available to the public for the longest time. However, not too long after this hearing concluded, the Pentagon came out and claimed that the Go Fast video is no more than a misunderstanding all of a sudden. They explained that the UFO in the video is nothing more than an illusion of parallax. I mean, really? Really? Parallax. So all these years, the video was irrelevant, but now that it came up in a witness testimony, it's just parallax. Yeah, sure. Got it. You know, I can't help but feel that this Pentagon official is full of honesty and truth. Please don't arrest me. Now, there's the case of Luis Elizondo, who has been very proactive during the disclosure movement. Like, very proactive. You've probably seen him on every late night show you can think of in the past few months promoting his new book. And when it came to the testimony, Elizondo had a lot to say, but not that much.
Sir, I wouldn't be able to have that conversation in an open hearing. Well, I prefer to answer that question in a closed session. Sir, I couldn't answer that. Sir, as I previously stated, and please forgive me, I am not authorized to discuss specifics about crash retrievals. I signed documentation with the U.S. government. What I can say was what I wrote about, and that was my limit, unfortunately.
And in no way am I trying to discredit Elizondo here for honoring his non-disclosure agreements. I come from the film industry where there are plenty of NDAs, and there is nothing more fierce than a lawyer during a breach of contract. However, there is one thing he said that I couldn't help but notice.
What I wrote about, and that was my limit, unfortunately. What I wrote about, and that was my limit, unfortunately.
So, you can't talk about any of this during a testimony, under oath, but you're allowed to write about it in your book? So, we just have to read your book to get to the nitty-gritty of what you're trying to convey, right? I don't think what Elizondo is doing is wrong, but man, the optics of it do not paint him in a good light. However, with that being said, each of these gentlemen deserve our respect and attention. I mean, if we learned anything from the David Grusch situation, is that these men are putting not only their careers, but their livelihoods on the line. They are willing to risk everything just so you and I can know the truth. A truth that, in Galladay's case, the Pentagon is desperately trying to cover up, and doing a terrible job of it, if I might add. And yeah, maybe Elizondo is trying to cash in on this whole ordeal, but that's not entirely the worst thing he can do right now. Hell, Bob Lazar is still alive today because he's been so public about his experiences working at Area 51. And if there's anything we've learned about whistleblowers, is that the more you try to hide, the more likely you are to disappear. But there's still a really important question we have yet to answer. Why all the UFOs all of a sudden? Well, there is one common denominator that seems to take precedence over all others.
There have been at least 5 nights, possibly 6 nights, of unexplained incursions by what the Air Force describes as drones over 3 of the most sensitive US bases, or British bases where the US Air Force is based, in the United Kingdom. And what distinguishes all of those bases is that it's very likely all of them have nuclear weapons. So this is a very grave situation.
So, a vast majority of these sightings take place in and around military bases sheltering nuclear warheads and equipment. For my international audience screaming that this is only taking place in the United States, you could not be more wrong. We already know about the sightings across the UK, but what about the sightings in Canada, South America, and even Moscow? But whatever these things are, they have become increasingly curious with our nuclear arsenal and capabilities. But why now? Well, it goes without saying that these are no ordinary drones. Hell, they certainly don't move like drones, at least the ones you and I have grown accustomed to. However, that doesn't necessarily mean they're alien. And I know, that may sound disingenuous coming from me since I've mentioned aliens several times throughout this video, but it's important to keep an open, rational mind, especially in a time when online accounts are desperately trying to mislead you. Could it be aliens examining our nuclear capabilities before an unknown catastrophe? Maybe. Could it be reverse-engineered craft developed by foreign adversaries such as Russia or China? Well, that sounds a little more likely, and yet both possibilities are terrifying. Because both imply that something bad is about to happen, that a tsunami is about to hit our small little island with us completely unaware, metaphorically speaking. And yet, there's something fishy about all of this, which is strange considering people using drones have been swarmed by authorities for far less. And in a time when our government is willing to shoot a mere weather balloon out the sky for even sniffing our airspace, that all of a sudden, we have not only become completely docile, but even submissive to these so-called drones, with no clear indication as to why.
The number of those UAS incursions did fluctuate on any given day, but they didn't appear to exhibit any hostile intent.
These craft are trespassing on restricted airspace. They are infiltrating military bases, harvesting nuclear assets. And yet, we take no action against them because they don't seem hostile. That has to be the most bizarre thing I have ever heard, because our national security is quite honestly in jeopardy, and yet we find ourselves sitting on our hands. Not to mention all the other UAP that have emerged recently. The biological jellyfish, the clouds, the sun-like orbs, which, by the way, were seen today floating over Manchester Airport when a pilot posted it to Twitter, before the account was immediately removed from the platform. Seriously, what the hell is going on? Does this not seem alarming to anybody in charge at the moment? And I know what many of my TikTok viewers are already typing in the comments. Project Bluebeam. The world governments aren't alarmed because this is all part of the grand plan of Project Bluebeam. A plan in which all global governments stage a fake alien invasion to unite the world against a fake alien threat so that they are more willing to accept a new world government, the New World Order. Now, I have some problems with this. Firstly, Project Bluebeam is supposed to be a top secret plan, and yet everyone is talking about it. Doesn't seem very top secret to me. I mean, come on. How are you supposed to throw a surprise party for someone that's in on the surprise? You don't. The plan wouldn't work because there's too many of us aware of it already. Second, the goal of Project Bluebeam is to unite the world together. And let me ask you a very personal question. Do you feel united right now? If you look at the world today, do you feel even an inch of unity? Sure, this grand plan may not be complete yet, so that's why there's no unity. But let's just take a brief look at our government's playbook. Regardless of your political beliefs, you have to admit that we are constantly being distracted. You are constantly being told to look elsewhere. Worry about immigrants. Worry about sex changes. Worry about diversity and equity. Hell, worry about your football coach losing 3 games in a row. Worry about anything else but those in charge. Those that are blatantly stealing your money for God knows what. You know what they say. Give them food and spectacle and they'll never revolt. This country's history up to this point proves one thing. This country does not want us united. They want us distracted by each other. They want us at each other's throats, because that takes the heat off them. And that's the way they want it. This country isn't made up of Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives. It's made up of rulers and servants. And if you're watching this video, chances are you're the latter, just like me. And believe it or not, these are not your rulers. They may take advantage of the system, but they are not the system. Because above them are a sect of people that go unchecked. They are the gods of Olympus that look down on the feeble populace. No one knows who they are, and maybe no one ever will. And they will never, ever give up power to a newly appointed global government. Because why would they? They already have all the power in the world. So no, I do not believe Project Bluebeam is a real thing, because that plan depends on the people being united, and we are anything but. Plus, the author of Project Bluebeam likely plagiarized the idea from a Star Trek episode, so yeah. Anyways, let's get back on topic and finish up. So, is the world about to end? Are we at the brink of nuclear war? Are aliens going to reveal themselves and save us from ourselves? Is our attention being drawn away from the UFOs, or are the UFOs the distraction? Well, your guess is as good as mine. This is an ongoing story after all, and there are topics that popped up just today that I didn't even have time to touch up on. But there's one thing that's certain. I can't help but feel like we've been here before. On the brink of nuclear annihilation, on the brink of World War III, on the brink of the apocalypse. It seems like this topic pops up every decade, and yet we're still here. Now, all the sightings have been alarming, but until something substantial becomes of them, there's really not much we can do about it. Maybe we are but fish in a fishbowl, and maybe we're starting to become aware of that. But here's the thing. Life goes on in the fishbowl. This fish still needs to eat, and this fish still needs to survive. Why worry about something beyond our control when we can just, I don't know, be a fish, live our lives, enjoy our friends and family, worry about the things that really matter in life? Aliens and UFOs could be beyond our comprehension, beyond our dimension, beyond our reality. Only time will tell what they truly are. But that doesn't mean we should live in fear. If the world is going to end, then let it end. There's nothing you nor I can do about it. So let me tell you what I'm going to do, what I believe. I'm going to be a fish, and I'm just going to keep on swimming until someone dumps the water out of the bowl. That's all we can do. And if we do that, well, I hope we can put aside our petty differences and all swim together. Thanks for watching, and good night. Whoa, you actually made it to the end of the video. That's incredible. That means you must have really liked it, so thank you so much for watching. If you like ghosts, aliens, cryptids, and other supernatural scary stories, feel free to subscribe to the channel with bell notifications to ensure that your scare mail continues to get delivered. Obviously, something tells me we're gonna have to follow this for quite some time, so be sure to subscribe again, because something tells me I'll have to do a follow-up episode on all of this. Thanks again for watching. Take care.